In ancient Persia, King Ahasuerus, ruling over 127 vast provinces, hosted an extraordinary royal feast in his palace in Shushan. He displayed the immense riches and glorious honor of his kingdom for an incredible 180 days. Afterward, the king made a 7-day banquet for all the people in Shushan, held within his palace garden. The garden was adorned with vibrant hangings of white, green, and blue, fastened to marble pillars with silver rings. Golden and silver couches rested on a mosaic pavement of red, white, yellow, and black marble. Guests received drinks in various golden vessels, with royal wine provided in great abundance. Drinking was not compulsory, for the king decreed that all should drink according to their own pleasure. Meanwhile, Queen Vashti also held a separate feast for the women within the royal house of King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, merry with wine, the king commanded his 7 eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before him. She was to wear her royal crown, so her great beauty could be shown to the people and princes. However, Queen Vashti refused to obey the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. Therefore, the king became exceedingly angry, and his fury burned deeply within him. The king consulted his wise men, who understood law and judgment, asking for their counsel. He asked what should be done to Queen Vashti, according to the law, for her disobedience. Memucan, one of the 7 princes, answered that Vashti had wronged not only the king, but all the people. He argued her deed would cause widespread contempt for husbands among all women in the kingdom. Memucan proposed a royal commandment that Vashti should never again appear before King Ahasuerus. He advised the king to give her royal position and estate to another woman more worthy than she. He suggested publishing this decree throughout the kingdom, so all wives, great and small, would honor their husbands. This advice greatly pleased both the king and his princes, and the king acted accordingly. He sent letters to every province, written in their own language, declaring that every man should rule his own house. After these events, when King Ahasuerus' wrath had subsided, he remembered Vashti and her decree. The king's servants then suggested searching for beautiful young virgins throughout the kingdom. They proposed appointing officers to gather these maidens to the citadel of Susa for care under Haggai. Cosmetics would be provided, and the maiden who pleased the king would become queen instead of Vashti. The plan pleased the king, and he commanded that it be carried out immediately. There was a Jew in Susa named Mordecai, who had been taken captive from Jerusalem. He raised his orphaned cousin, Hadassah, also known as Esther, who was fair and beautiful. When the king's decree was announced, Esther was taken to the king's house under Haggai's custody. Esther pleased Haggai, who quickly provided her special cosmetics, food, and 7 choice maidens. Esther did not reveal her people or relatives, as Mordecai had strictly instructed her. Every day, Mordecai walked before the women's court, checking on Esther's well-being. Each young woman underwent 12 months of purification with oil of myrrh and sweet fragrances. When her turn came, she went to King Ahasuerus, taking whatever she desired from the women's house. She returned the next day to another house to keep concubines, and would not see the king again unless he called her by name. When Esther's turn came, she asked for nothing beyond what Haggai advised. Esther found favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her. Esther was brought to King Ahasuerus in the 10th month of his 7th reign year. The king loved Esther more than all other women, crowning her queen instead of Vashti. The king then made a great feast for all his princes and servants, celebrating Esther. He proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and generously distributed gifts. Later, as virgins were gathered a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther still kept her people's secret, just as Mordecai had commanded her since childhood. While Mordecai was at the gate, 2 eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, conspired to kill King Ahasuerus. Mordecai learned of their plot and informed Queen Esther about it. Esther, in Mordecai's name, then reported the conspiracy to the king. The matter was investigated, found true, and both eunuchs were hanged. It was recorded in the King's Chronicles. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, exalting him above all other princes. All king's servants at the gate bowed to Haman, as commanded by the king. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to Haman. The king's servants questioned Mordecai daily, asking why he disobeyed the king's commandment. When Mordecai continued to refuse, telling them he was a Jew, they reported it to Haman. When Haman saw Mordecai's refusal to bow, he was filled with extreme wrath. Scornful of harming Mordecai alone, Haman sought to destroy all Jews throughout the entire kingdom. In the 12th year, lots were cast before Haman, selecting the 12th month, Adar, for their destruction. Haman told the king about a scattered people whose laws differed and who disobeyed royal laws. He claimed it was not profitable for the king to allow them to remain in the kingdom. Haman offered to pay 10,000 talents of silver to the king's treasuries for their destruction. The king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the Jews' enemy. The king told Haman, "The silver is given to you, and the people also, to do as you see fit." The king's scribes were called, and all Haman commanded was written to officials in every province. The decree was written in King Ahasuerus' name and sealed with the king's ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all provinces to destroy, kill, and cause all Jews to perish. This included young and old, little children, and women. On the 13th day of Adar, the letters also permitted the plunder of their possessions on that single day. A copy of the decree was published in every province, so all peoples would be ready. The couriers went out in haste. The decree was given in Susa, while the king and Haman drank, and the city was perplexed. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and wailed bitterly in the city. He came as far as the king's gate, for no one was allowed inside, clothed in sackcloth. In every province, wherever the decree arrived, Jews mourned with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Esther's maidens and eunuchs told her, and the queen was excessively grieved. She sent clothes to Mordecai to replace his sackcloth, but he refused them. Esther then called Hathach, a eunuch, commanding him to find out what was troubling Mordecai. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square before the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything, including Haman's exact sum offered for Jewish destruction. He also gave Hathach a copy of the written decree to show Esther, urging her to plead with the king. Hathach returned and delivered Mordecai's words to Queen Esther. Esther then sent Hathach back with a message for Mordecai. She explained that approaching the king uncalled meant death, unless he extended the golden scepter, and she hadn't been called in 30 days. Mordecai sent back a warning. She should not think she would escape in the palace. If she remained silent, deliverance would come from another place, but she and her family would perish. Mordecai questioned if she had come to her royal position for such a time as this. Esther then sent her answer back to Mordecai. She asked him to gather all Jews in Susa to fast for her for 3 days, night and day. "I and my maidens will fast, likewise," she declared. "Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went and did everything that Esther had commanded him. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal clothing and stood in the inner court of the palace. The king sat on his royal throne in the palace, near the entrance. When the king saw Queen Esther standing, she found favor, and he extended his golden scepter. Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter, saving her life. The king asked, "What is your request, Queen Esther?" "It shall be given, even to half the kingdom." Esther replied, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared." The king commanded, "Bring Haman quickly, so we may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the wine banquet, the king again asked Esther her petition, promising to grant it, even half the kingdom. Esther answered, requesting the king and Haman come to a second banquet she would prepare tomorrow. Haman left that day joyful, but seeing Mordecai at the king's gate refusing to stand, he was filled with wrath. Haman restrained himself and went home, calling for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Haman recounted his great riches, his many children, and how the king had promoted him above all princes. He boasted that Queen Esther had invited only him with the king to her banquets, even tomorrow. Yet, he declared, all this availed him nothing, as long as he saw Mordecai the Jew at the king's gate. Zeresh and his friends advised Haman to build gallows 50 cubits high. They suggested speaking to the king in the morning to hang Mordecai, then going merrily to the banquet. This pleased Haman, so he immediately ordered the gallows to be built. That night, the king could not sleep, so he commanded the book of Chronicles to be read to him. It was found written that Mordecai had reported Bigthana and Teresh's plot against the king. The king asked what honor or dignity had been given to Mordecai for this deed. His attending servants replied, "Nothing has been done for him." The king asked who was in the court. Haman had just arrived, intending to speak about hanging Mordecai. The king's servants replied, "Behold, Haman is standing in the court." The king commanded, "Let him come in." And Haman entered. The king asked Haman, "What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" Haman thought to himself, "Who would the king delight to honor more than myself?" Haman suggested bringing royal clothing and the king's own horse with a royal crown on its head. He proposed a noble prince lead the honored man on horseback through the city square. The prince would proclaim, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." The king then told Haman, "Hurry, take the clothing and horse as you have said, and do this for Mordecai, the Jew." Haman took the royal clothing and horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him through the city square, proclaiming his honor. Mordecai returned to the king's gate, while Haman hurried home, mourning and with his head covered. Haman recounted everything to his wife and friends, who then said he would surely fall before Mordecai. While they were still speaking, the king's eunuchs arrived to hasten Haman to Esther's second banquet. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Queen Esther. On the second day at the banquet, the king again asked Esther her petition, promising to grant half the kingdom. Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor, let my life be given me, and my people's lives at my request." She explained that she and her people were sold to be utterly destroyed, slain, and to perish. King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, "Who is he, and where is he, who dared presume to do this?" Esther declared, "An adversary and an enemy, even this wicked Haman." Haman was instantly terrified before the king and the queen. The king arose in wrath from the banquet of wine and stormed into the palace garden. Haman stood up, begging Queen Esther for his life, seeing the king had determined evil against him. The king returned from the garden, finding Haman fallen on the couch where Esther was. The king exclaimed, "Will he even assault the queen in front of me in the house?" As the words left the king's mouth, attendants immediately covered Haman's face. Harbona, a eunuch, then pointed out the 50-cubit gallows Haman built for Mordecai, standing at Haman's house. The king commanded, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. And the king's wrath was pacified. That day, King Ahasuerus gave Haman's house, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had revealed their family connection. The king took his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther then appointed Mordecai over Haman's former household. Esther again spoke before the king, falling at his feet, tearfully begging him to reverse Haman's wicked plot against the Jews. The king held out the golden scepter to Esther, and she arose to stand before him. She asked that letters be written to reverse Haman's decree that sought to destroy the Jews. She cried, "How can I endure to see the evil that would come to my people, or the destruction of my relatives?" King Ahasuerus told Esther and Mordecai that Haman was hanged, and his house given to Esther. He instructed them to write new letters to the Jews as they pleased, sealed with his ring. For, he explained, a writing sealed with the king's ring cannot be reversed. The king's scribes were called on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, Sivan. Letters were written according to Mordecai's command to all 127 provinces, peoples, and Jews in their languages. He wrote in the king's name, sealed it with the royal ring, and sent letters by swift couriers on royal horses. The letters granted Jews in every city the right to gather and defend their lives. They could destroy, kill, and cause to perish any power assaulting them, including plunder. This was authorized for one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar. A copy of the letter was published in every province, so the Jews would be ready to avenge themselves. The royal couriers hastened, pressed by the king's command, and the decree was given out in Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence in royal blue and white, with a gold crown and fine linen robe. The city of Susa shouted and was filled with gladness. The Jews experienced light, gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and city, Jews had gladness, joy, feasting, and many people converted out of fear. On the 13th day of Adar, when enemies hoped to conquer the Jews, the opposite occurred. The Jews gathered in their cities to confront those who wanted to harm them. None could withstand them. All provincial princes, governors, and royal officials helped the Jews due to their fear of Mordecai. Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread as he grew greater and greater. The Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, causing great slaughter and destruction. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Haman's 10 sons, Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adaliah, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vizatha. However, they did not lay their hand upon the plunder. On that day, the number of those slain in Susa was reported to the king. The king told Esther about the 500 killed, including Haman's sons, and asked her further request. Esther requested that Jews in Shushan be allowed to act again tomorrow, and Haman's 10 sons be hanged. The king commanded it to be done. A new decree was given in Shushan, and Haman's 10 sons were hanged. Jews in Shushan gathered again on the 14th of Adar, killing 300 more men, but again took no plunder. Other Jews in the provinces defended their lives and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, without plunder. This was on the 13th of Adar. On the 14th they rested and celebrated with feasting. The Jews in Shushan assembled on the 13th and 14th. On the 15th they rested and feasted. Therefore, village Jews observe the 14th of Adar as a day of gladness, feasting, and sending food presents. Mordecai wrote these events, sending letters to all Jews in the provinces. He enjoined them to keep the 14th and 15th days of Adar yearly. These days marked rest from enemies, turning sorrow to gladness, and mourning to a good day. They were to be days of feasting, gladness, sending food presents, and gifts to the needy. The Jews accepted the custom they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them. This was because Haman had plotted their destruction, casting lots, poor, to consume them. But when this became known, the king commanded Haman's wicked plan to return on his own head. Therefore, they called these days Purim, from the word poor. The Jews established and imposed on themselves and their descendants to keep these 2 days yearly, forever. These days were to be remembered and kept throughout every generation, family, province, and city, never to fail. Queen Esther and Mordecai confirmed this second letter of Purim with all authority. Mordecai sent letters of peace and truth to all Jews in the 127 provinces. This confirmed the appointed times of Purim, including fastings and their cry, as decreed. Esther's command confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. King Ahasuerus laid a tribute on the land and the islands of the sea. All acts of his power and Mordecai's greatness are written in the chronicles of Media and Persia. Mordecai the Jew was next to King Ahasuerus, great among his people, seeking their good and speaking peace to his descendants.